Hey, welcome back. Last video I did a call for questions, doing a Ask Me Anything AMA, and you people did so. I got a ton of questions and I kind of sorted through them. I picked out some just from the top of the list, some out somewhere in the list, and also the questions from Patreon. There's not more to it. It's AMA, it's a lot of talking. So if that's not the kind of video you enjoy, better skip this one. Warning, no actual machining in this video. No nothing in this video. It's just me talking. So let's start. John's Workshop asks, are you using standard off-the-shelf Fusion 360 free license or an updated version? I use a commercial license. Since I make money using it, since the YouTube channel is monetized and I do customer work, I think it's just fair or right to pay the yearly subscription fee and have really a pretty good piece of software. I'm still absolutely not happy with the cloud storage, but it is what it is. I have also a Libre Designer Express and Bobcat, which, how do I say this in a kind way? A Libre Designer is really a good piece of software for what it costs. Bobcat works, but I had to ditch it because the computation time on some of the parts I did was horrendous. Toolpath creation on a 2.5D part that took like 2 minutes in Fusion 360 took like an hour in Bobcat, and that was just not possible because I needed to iterate through that special part, and it drove me insane, and I just went online and bought the freaking Fusion 360 license and got it done within a short amount of time. So yeah, I pay for it, and I wish there was a non-cloud based version, but it is what it is. Sion Lee asks, do you have a favorite Star Trek series or episode? And the answer, of course, is yes, because like everyone who has a favorite franchise, we have about 20 favorite things in that franchise. So, favorite series? TOS, the original series, which also has some of the best episodes ever written for Star Trek, like Balance of Terror, The Devil in the Dark, and City on the Edge of Forever. Those three episodes are, in my mind, a must-see for any sci-fi fan. Then Deep Space Nine is my close second. It's less about the episodes on Deep Space Nine, it's more about the characters, and they finally gave my main man, Miles O'Brien, a proper job, not only operating the transporter. They made him the janitor. And of course, Next Generation, very important. Has some great episodes, some very wonky episodes, but then you have episodes like Best of Both Worlds, which are just super important. I'm not a fan of new Trek like Star Trek Discovery, the J.J. Abrams movies, or Picard. They're probably fine. I'm not a big fan of it. I haven't seen Strange New Worlds because it doesn't get streamed here. I think it's only on HBO and we don't get that here. But I have high hopes for Strange New Worlds. So that's Star Trek for me. I have talked way longer than I probably should in a machining video, but you asked. So, Alistair Hamilton asks, what is your and your family history? Was it machining, mechanical, medical, educational, military? Well, we're all kind of hands-on people. My dad was a tool tie maker. My mother was a butcher. My grandpa was a bricklayer. My brother is a Radio- und Fernsehtechniker, a TV and radio repair electronic electrician, but today he works as a database specialist programmer. So we're all kind of hands-on. The only one who was in the military is my grandpa on my father's side of the family, but I never knew him. And myself, I served in the Bundeswehr for the 9 months that we had to do. But since then, nothing military related anymore. Martin Dietrich asks, which cutting oil do you use? That's an easy one. I use Jokirch Heavy Duty Cutting Oil Alpha 93. I like this a lot. I think it's plant oil based. It doesn't smell. It's not very smoky when it burns. It works well in steel, stainless, titanium, and all the weird materials. It doesn't stain materials, which some of the chlorided cutting oils do. It doesn't ruin my skin. And I buy it in this large 5-liter canisters. It's really not very cheap. I think this canister is like $100, but it lasts quite a long time. Micromechanics and micromachining is not a common task as paid work. How do you find your clients for such niche specifications? Well, they find me. The word is out there that I do this kind of work. I have basically with my YouTube channel a showcase or a portfolio of what I can do and what I do. And people come to me with this kind of work. And also that's kind of the specialty work that I like to take on most of the time. I do some other stuff too, but everything that's smaller than my thumb, that's what's really fun for me and where I think I can excel as a machine shop and as a machinist. Kepa Murray asks, what are your 5 favorite bands? Do you listen to music while you're working in the shop? That's a very good question. And the answer is yes, of course, I listen to music in the shop. I listen to podcasts a lot, but also music. I'm either wearing Bluetooth in-ear headphones or I have loudspeakers. Favorite bands, favorite 5 bands. I probably have 20 favorite 5s. Let's see. Sabaton, Hammerfall, Powerwolf, Blind Guardian, Nightwish, or Running Wild, Arch Enemy, Agatha Diamond. We can go on and go on and go on. Also, I Perturbator, Carpenter Brute, things like that. Mostly metal, some dark ambient, some gothic, some things like that. Mechanical engineering. The truth is, I haven't studied anything. I'm a Facharbeiter, means I served an apprenticeship in mechatronics, means I'm half mechanic or machinist and half electrician or electronics guy, also a little bit of PLC programming, hydraulics, pneumatics. We're basically the Swiss Army knife of automation. But in reality, I specialized on the mechanical side of things. While on the topic of music, George M. asks, what are the best German metal bands that are poor uncultured for it I would never ever have heard of? Well, Rammstein is a simple one, but those are very, very well known. I would say Running Wild, Paragon, Powerwolf, and of course Gravedigger, and of course Blind Guardian. But those are a little bit better known. And not to forget the the ever awesome metal a cappella band Van Canto. They are hilarious, they make great music. Look them up, listen to them, and thank me later. Dwayne Dickey asks, what company did you do your apprenticeship with? And the company I work for is also the company I did my apprenticeship with. And that's Siemens. The part of Siemens that's doing the RCDs, breakers, AFDDs, all switchgear stuff. Still on the topic of music, DIY EMC asks, Gravedigger shirt in a video right after the Wacken weekend without the usual signs of a past festival means not a huge fan of crowds or no ticket. By the way, they played a great show. Yeah, I saw some footage of this year's Wacken Festival. I was 3 times there, 2005, 2006 and 2007. And yeah, it's really a huge crowd and to be honest, I'm not a big fan of huge crowds. On the Wacken weekend, I was on a metal festival, but it was a local one. It's called the Metal United Festival. It's organized by the owner of a small metal bar here. And they had like, I think 12 bands. And it was really a great festival. Small festival. We didn't camp there. It's close enough to drive back and forth. Well, we enjoyed it. It was outside. It was great weather. Just a nice festival. Jasper Hellberg asks, what types, if any, of jobs do you turn down and why? Well, obviously jobs that are beyond my skill level. Jobs that require either heavy fabrication, heavy material removal, or things like that. Just work that's not catered to either the style of work I do or my machinists I have. I'm not out here to compete with the guy that has a DMG vertical machining center in his barn. That's not the work I do. I do the work that the guy with the VMC is not interested in. I'm the guy sitting on the workbench under the microscope and deburring for hours if necessary. MC Enforcer. Question. Your English is very good and you often use expressions that are more UK than US. Have you ever worked or lived in the UK? No. I was never in the UK. The fact that my English is a little bit more UK oriented is because that's the English that's taught here at schools. The good old Oxford English. The American English is considered a slang here. But I'm not sure. I think my English is a weird mix of all slangs. If I watch some creator on YouTube with a certain slang or dialect, I notice that I will pick it up over time and use expressions of that certain person myself. So Nick J asks, what is the economics of your shop in Germany? Is it something you do only on the side? Will it grow? How do you compete with other continental Europe shops? Where would you like to take it? Well, where would you like to take it? I would like to be able to live completely off my own shop and obviously off YouTube. YouTube is highly volatile. It could end from one day to another if Google or the associated AdSense system makes a major change. But then I still have a Patreon where people can support me. But in the end, I want the shop to be completely self-sufficient and be able to live off it. I'm not interested in having employees. I want to stay on my own in the shop. Currently, I'm working part-time. I'm working 28 hours per week. That's 4 days at my day job as a mechanic or machine builder, and the rest of the time I work in my own shop doing customer work and of course YouTube. The question of competing is not that critical for me because usually the work I do, larger shops with heavy duty machines, with large VMCs or CNC lathes are not interested in the work that I take on and vice versa. So that's working quite well for me. Hey, my question for Q&A. Do you know any suitable open source 3D CAD software or paid but available for Linux? No. Well, yes. There is FreeCAD, but it's super janky. It works, but it's janky. It has a long way to go. I think it will, at some point in its lifetime, it will be usable, but currently, there are people who make it work, but to be productive, if you know commercial CAD packages, it's really tough. There used to be a Pro Engineer version. I think that was before Wildfire 3 that ran on Linux, but I don't think you can get that anymore. You can run Fusion 360 in the Wine environment, or you can run it in VirtualBox. I did that quite some time, but it's also quite janky. To be honest, the best solution to run CAD on a Linux system is to have a dual boot system. Hi, one question. What are the necessary tools to start learning scraping? With no shop in hand, just a bench, patience, and a few euros to spare. A good source for the theory would also be very appreciated. So for scraping, you don't need much. You need a scraper, preferable with a carbide blade. Yes, you can take an old file and reshape it into a scraper, but if there is any possibility, get a scraper with either a braced on carbide blade, make one yourself, or buy, for example, the Sandvik carbide scraper. Then you need a way to sharpen the carbide scraper or the normal scraper. A bench grinder with a diamond wheel will do. If you're really in a pinch, a diamond file and 2 different grids will work. There are many ways to do that. Or you can even build a diamond lap for very cheap with a piece of aluminum, an old motor, and some diamond paste. Then you need something to scrape, a part that you want to work on, for example, just an old angle plate to learn on. You need a master surface, like a cheap import granite surface plate. That's honestly the cheapest way to get a flat reference surface. Or you buy a used surface plate. If you want to do machine ways, you need straight edges, of course, but that's advanced already. For the beginning, you really need just a reference surface, high spot blue, for example, from Diamond or Dicam, and the carbide scraper, or a normal scraper. And as for references or resources, well, I have 2 videos on scraping, which are horrendous outdated, but the theory is not wrong in there. If you need it in English language, you can go on Practical Machinist. You will find there is a machine rebuilding forum. You will find about a bazillion posts on theory there, and a lot of ranting and a lot of insulting each other, but there is good information on there. But as in, and of course, Connelly's machine tool reconditioning book. Jim's video asks, Q for your AMA, what's fun when you're not in the shop? Well, I'm an avid cinema visitor. Nothing compares to watching a movie on the big screen. When the lights go out, it's just movie time. We pretty much watch everything that's new released. But also the cinemas in the next city also show older movies. Like recently we watched a screening of the original Blade Runner, which is I'm too young to have it seen in the cinema, but that was a great opportunity. I like also when I'm not in the cinema, I like to watch movies in general, 70s, 80s, 90s. Action, sci-fi, and horror, exploitation movies. That's the style of movies I like. Also, about a little bit over a year ago, I picked up bouldering, like indoor climbing on walls that are about 4 meters tall, and at most you climb without safety gear. I picked that up due to a good friend, and I'm going about 2 to 3 times a week, and it's really good. It helps me. It's good for my general health. It's good for my mental health, and it's a tremendous amount of fun. And also, I notice a good progress when I go there, and there is a new route mounted in the wall, and You look at the route and you just notice, oh, I understand how this will work. I can do this. And then you just work your way through the individual steps to figure out how to solve a certain problem. It's problem solving, just on a more physical level. Also, I have to care for a house and 1,800 square meters of garden, so it doesn't get boring for me. Ron Erickson asks, as a machinist, you have demonstrated a fantastic ability to build almost anything you need or may need around the shop. How do you decide when to buy instead of build items you need? Where is the clear decision point between my time is worth more than that, and I can make that for cheaper, better, faster? I have trouble with that myself sometimes. Well, we all have that problem. I can make that cheaper, better, or faster is in almost every case a lie to yourself, to be honest, if you consider a decent hourly rate. When I was more of an hobby-oriented shop, of course, I had more time than money. Then the question was easy. Then I just built everything myself. You just need to go back in my YouTube channel and you see what happened. I built everything. That has kind of unfortunately gone away since I do a lot of customer work. In these cases, often it's the case of, can I get it? Can I get it fast? And where can I get it? And then I will just order it and buy it, as sad as it is. But I still make stuff for myself, either as a recreational project like the Toolmakers cubes that I'm working on, or the rebuild and improving of my D-bit grinder, but those are long-term projects once again. And yeah, or if it's something that you just cannot buy. For example, the low-profile V-block that Adam Demuth made and sent me one of. That's something I have not seen something like that commercially available, so that's a case where you have to make it yourself. Jacob Schaus asks, hello Stefan, I would like to know about any of your mentors that may have left an impression on your career. I believe in one of your videos you mentioned your father was a tool and die maker. I love the shop talk, but enjoy hearing stories about the people who helped us along the way too. Yes, my dad was a tool and die maker, and I learned a tremendous amount from him, mostly by him being just walking in the shop and looking what I was up to and what I was working on, and just giving comments and giving little pointers and just giving little hints. In my professional life, I had a lot of people who made a large impact on on my abilities today. I used to work with an old tool and die maker when I was in the laboratory, when I did mechanical stress testing and electrical stress testing on light switches and outlets. And we built all the test gear ourselves. And he was a tool and die maker through and through, and I learned a lot from him. Also, my foreman, when I was in prototyping at work, he had about 20, 30 years of experience in prototyping. He was not a machinist, but he was he was able to do bench work really good, like picking out corners and milled parts with gravers, bending parts. Bending was really his specialty, bending parts in a vise on a press brake with custom dies. This I picked up a lot from him. We were always questioning each other when we were talking about work. I was questioning his recommendations and he was questioning mine, and so we had a checks and balances if that was the right way to do a certain job. Well, and pretty much every other person I came across in my professional life, I was able to learn something from. And I think you can pretty much learn from anyone something. I need a good nickname. In your taskbar, I noticed Steam running. So do you game frequently and what games do you play? Well, look in my Steam library here. Rainbow Six Siege, 500 hours. That is probably the game that I played the most over the last years. And I kind of enjoyed it a lot. The destructible environment is really a neat element in the game. But it seems like they take it away because it's problematic with a high level of competitive gameplay, because it's very random when you blow through a wall. And of course, Jagged Alliance 2 Wildfire, this is currently installed and I'm currently playing it. This is probably one of the best strategy games ever done. I revisit every few years, and it's really fun. Factorio is installed currently. This is kind of an automation engineer's nightmare gone computer game. Highly recommended if you want to lose time. Battlefield 5. I have also Battlefield 1, which is not here in Steam. Also Battlefield 2042, which is a pile of shit. Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I played through it in multiplayer many times. 223 hours. Way too many hours in this. These playtimes here don't match up really with what happened. I'm pretty sure that I have more than 3 hours in Counter-Strike GO. Not sure what's going on here. All the Half-Life games, of course. Insurgency Sandstorm is really great. Really, that's quite a bit of fun. Not installed currently. Well, yeah, and you see this. Oh, don't buy Necromunda Hired Guns. It's kind of pile of garbage. Better buy Portal and Portal 2. CRS1. Of all the machines that have left your possession over the years, are there any you wish you retained or regret parting with? To be honest, no. It were many nice machines. The Gug Shaper, the engraving machine, for example. My old lathe. But each time I replaced them with something more suitable for the condition or the work I do. The shaper was basically replaced by the surface grinder, and now my surface grinder, the French Lip 515 surface grinder, was replaced with the new BMAS surface grinder. It's always a slow upgrade and adjustment to the work and also my personal preferences. Same for the CNCs. I had the easel CNC router. I had the old Deckel CNC that I converted to CNC myself. I had the step mowers, and I don't miss any of them. The machine I have now is the most suitable for the work I do now. Sean Huck asks, Stefan, what do you use for rust prevention when you're washing parts and tools in water? Well, not much. When I take the parts out of the parts washer with the cleaning solution I have in there, which is basically water with, it's very strong soapy water, I would say. I either rinse them with alcohol or distilled water, blow them dry with compressed air, then I just put them away. Usually that's more than adequate for the level of humidity I have in my shop. I have usually about 22 to 25 degrees C in my shop and a humidity of 45 to 55%. And that seems to take care of rust problems good enough. For general rust protection, I use two products which I'm not sponsored of, but that I use. One is LPS3. I think that's very common in the US. I learned from Robin Renzetti, and this is really, you spray this on, it dries in a film, it's really waxy. I put this, for example, under the vices of my mill or under the solid tool post on my lathe, or when I have to put parts in deep storage, I will spray them down with the stuff, then just wrap the parts either in paper or in wrap foil. For a less heavy duty conservation, I use this stuff. This is Ecol Feuchtigkeitsschutzspray, which means moisture prevention spray, something. I'm not sure if you can get this outside of Germany, probably. This also dries like a wax, but way thinner. It's almost, you can put this, for example, on parallels or stuff like that. Just put them in storage, and when you take the parallels out to use them, you just wipe them down with a piece of paper and they're good to go. With this is when the LPS3 dries, it's a little bit more tedious to get the parts you're working with clean again. An alternative is fluid film, but I can't stand the smell of that stuff. It smells like a wet sheep. And here, for comparing those two, this is the LPS3. This is a very thick material. And when it dries, it will leave a film with a real thickness to it. And this is the Ecol. As you can see, this is way thinner. And when you just spray it on in a thin layer, it will also dry that way. And this will wipe off very easy. And both of them are excellent rust preventives. I never had issues with them. The LPS3 stands up to coolant and cutting oil and stuff like that, like crazy. A little bit hard to get here in Germany. For those in Germany who ask where I get this stuff, there is one person on eBay who regularly sells about 1 to 3 tins of this stuff, and I usually just buy all of them when they're available. Lars S. asks, sure, you have been asked many times, but what brand are those safety glasses you always wear? These are made by Uvex. They are prescription safety glasses, and I have two sets of these, 2 pairs. They are identical. They are made by, well, here, Uvex, very common personal safety equipment manufacturer here in Germany. They make safety glasses with or without prescription, safety boots, safety shoes, earplugs, hearing protection, basically everything that you need to not die on the job. And I like these a lot. They're very comfortable to wear. They close up nicely on the side of my head, and I wear those as everyday glasses. So if you see me out on the street, I'm probably most likely wearing these because I have no clue where my other glasses are. Highly recommended. Casper Elbeck asks, can you talk about the choice of DRO for your lathe? Which brand, type, resolution of the scales, other considerations? So for the longest time I used to have a different one with the old school style with the 7-segment LED readout, but I changed to a Icron LCD DRO, and I like this a lot. It does the same thing as the other one. The other one worked perfectly fine. I put that in deep storage for cases of emergency. The LCD ones are nicer to use. You have, well, on the lathe you don't need that much options because it's just a lathe. On the mill you have other options, but basically you have your different coordinate systems here. These need to be easy accessible on a DRO because you use those either for different operations or, in my case, as a tool storage. SDM21, for example, is on my lathe a parting blade. And when I switch through those, 22, 23 is a grooving tool, and you see that those offsets change when I switch through the tools. And this is absolutely important for a lathe DRO in my mind if you want to be productive, having the option to change through tools. Also, the LCD DROs have this indicator bar down here. This shows you when you approach your 0. When you set up a production job with different coordinates that you need to step off after each other, and you use, for example, SDM 1 to 10, and you enter the coordinates in ways that you always move the axis to 0, then change to the next coordinate system, move to 0, next coordinate system, and so on and so on and so on. This indicator here is extremely helpful because it allows you very quickly to approach very precisely your 0 mark. See how quick that goes? Just by eyeballing the red bar into the center mark here. You don't even have to really look at the numbers to get it within 20 micron. Also, you want your buttons easy accessible for zeroing out your positions or for entering coordinates. You want a calculator in it. You want an easy way to switch between metric and inch. Well, that's on the lathe. That's most important facts on the lathe. My cross slide scale has a resolution of 1 micron, but the DRO reads it in 2 micron because I'm doubling the value to get the diameter. So this is in diameter mode. I can switch it to radius mode, then it reads 1 micron, but that's we're working in diameters on a lathe, so I'm running this in diameter. And bed slide is also a 1 micron scale, and as you can see, I can move the bed slide of this lathe relatively precise within a few micron using the big hand wheel. Also, very useful feature, it shows the current feed in millimeters per second. I think there is a software update from Icron coming that changes the feed display to millimeters per minute, which is the way more common unit. So yeah, that's the readout. And let's go to the mill quickly. This is a Yishno from, I think I bought this on Banggood for a ridiculous low amount of money, and I would not buy this again. It does not work with all linear scales. The linear scales I have they have an A, B and index signal, and they also have the negative signal. So A negative, B negative. And this readout cannot handle these linear scales in my case. I had to change the wiring on those linear scales. It means I had to cut the wires for the negative comparing signal. Now it works. In theory, this makes the readout and the linear scales more prone to counting errors, but I haven't noticed any problems so far, so I'm keeping it. On a mill readout, so you have the bolt hole circle function, and on a graphical DRO with an LCD, this is really neat because you really have the red dot, which is your current position, and you just crank it in position by eyeball, and then you look at the numbers and get it into final position. So this is way faster than just looking at numbers and moving it. Then you just can switch through the points that you programmed and move to all those positions and drill your holes out, or whatever operation you have to do. You also have this for hole arrays. You can do circle milling, which allows you to cut radii in a cusped manner by moving off in individual steps and creating kind of a radius that way. You can do this in XY or also in CX and CY if you want to do a top-down radius. Then you have a function to cut a pocket. Don't use that ever. Probing, this one doesn't have probing, doesn't have the input plug for it mounted. Yeah, that's the important functions on a DRO for a mill in my eyes. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have, of course, Heidenhain, which is extremely expensive readout. This is on my surface grinder. I bought it with the surface grinder. The readout and the two linear scales are, I think, almost 5,000 euros. But I would never doubt the precision of these scales. This obviously doesn't have buttons, it's a touch display. We have the same ones at our manual mill at work, and I was already familiar with it and I kind of like it, despite it being a touch display. Little trick, if you have a touch display DRO, go on the internet, find a place that cuts screen protectors to size, and have them make a screen protector in the Gorilla Glass equivalent, matching your DRO, and this will protect your horrendous expensive DRO display. And this is really nice. I have it set to 1 micron showing. The linear scales are analog, and this readout interpolates them, I think, to 0.1 micron, and I can set it even to that, but then it gets a little bit jumpy. But in this case, 1 micron is perfectly fine. And this also shows the current feed rate when you hand crank it in millimeters per minute, which is the more sensible unit. And this is very nice when you dress, for example, your grinding wheel and want reasonable, repeatable parameters, because you just can traverse, for example, with 300 millimeters roundabout over the diamond and get your even dress. It has some functions like bolt hole circle, which I don't need here on the grinder, because this is mill and lathe readout. They don't make a specific grinder readout. Also, my axes are named wrong. It's XY on in my readout. Usually it would be Y for the height elevation and C for the cross traverse, and the table movement back and forth would be X. But I keep it this way because I can use the bolt hole circle function in here to do radius grinding. This doesn't work if the axis names are off. Back at the mill for a second. The resolution on the mill is 5 micron per division. I found that perfectly adequate for the style of work I do. Ryan Johnson asked, between the Deckel and D-bit grinder, which is used more often for grinding tools? Which would you say is more useful? So I have a little bit of a grinder addiction. I have the D-bit grinder. I have the Deckel S1 tool and cutter grinder, which is a full-fledged tool cutter grinder. And I also have the Bema surface grinder. Between all those 3 machines, they all serve for tool grinding in my shop. If I could have only one machine for grinding, it would be a surface grinder, because it's the most universal machine from all 3 of them. And it's the best surface grinder, and it's the best cylindrical grinder with accessories. It cannot do spiral flute tooling, or not without heavy trickster movements. But apart from that, if you want a grinder and you can afford it and you have the space for it, a surface grinder is the way to go. For example, a small Herrick 6x12 surface grinder would be a tremendous addition to any shop. Not only surface grinding, not only cylindrical grinding using a spin fixer or a punch grinder, but it's also an excellent tool grinder for lathe tools, for example. But it can also do mill tooling if you're creative. Then we have the S1 tool and cutter grinder. Super cool machine, can do spiral flute tooling, can do tooling between centers very easily, very fast to set up for a tool and cutter grinder. You need sometimes to wrap your head around all the possible movements, and sometimes that's the hardest part of grinding tools. I would say this is more of an expert machine. I have no clue why I have it then, because I'm not a tool grinding person, but I like to use it. It's a great machine. It's very universal. You can press it into many roles. You can also do a little bit of less surface grinding, but you can do grinding on parts. You can grind wrench flats on hardened parts or chamfers on hardened parts, for example. That works super nice. It's a relatively compact machine for what it can do. It's way smaller than one of the Cincinnati tool and cutter grinders. This is when you want really to deep dive into tool grinding and also want to do axial and radial clearance grinding, helical grinding. It's great for saw blades. I've ground so many saw blades on this machine. I sharpen reamers on it. I really do a lot on this machine. And then the D-bit grinder. D-bit grinder in parts, part assembled here. The D-bit grinder is a must-have machine if you can have only one grinder and cannot afford a surface grinder, but you need tool grinding capabilities, then D-bit grinder. Great for grinding lathe tools. It's really good for that. It's good for grinding D-bits because it's made for that. You can do 4 facet grinds on drills up to maybe 10 to 12 millimeters. Very good with it. You can grind, you can cut carbide to length with it. You can cut high-speed steel blanks to length with it. You can do a little bit of cylindrical grinding on it, like creating a stepped punch or something like that. For the space this machine requires, it's almost ridiculous what it all can do. Don't bother with the accessories like the helical grinding attachment. That's no good for this machine. It's too wobbly. Just get one with the regular indexing head, with the style of collets you prefer, probably 5C because they are more common and larger in size. Mine uses the decal collets. Maurice Lucas asks, are you finished with the flux capacitor or is it still work in progress? Well, time will tell. Scott Black, with the way covers on your Super 11, how do you get the oil onto the ways? Did you modify the carriage to have oil ports? Did you put oil grooves? No, the carriage is still original. And I oil the bed and the carriage just as Emco intended by putting oil on the ways and cranking the carriage over it. I do that with a regular oil can. I just lift the way cover up a little bit and put some ISO 68 weight way oil onto the ways. So the prototype asks, hi Stefan, one for the list of questions. Considerations on dust management in small shops where separate shop rooms for every department is not possible. I'd be especially interested in your thoughts on grinding dust, dry, wet grinding, carbide dust, and what filters and how often you change them. So my general solution for dust in the shop is this contraption. This is a Festool CTL Mini dust extractor, a glorified shop vac with a relatively good filter class, as long as you run it with the filter bags. The filter bags are part of the filter class on these type of dust extractors. The problem is those are horrendous expensive, the dust bags that is. If you just use it to suck up chips or something like that, that gets very expensive very fast. The solution is, which has been shown on the internet about 1 million times before, is a cyclone separator. It's this thing up here, this funnel looking part. This will separate all solid media that has some weight to it or reasonable weight to it out of the airstream into this metal bucket here on top of the dust extractor, and only air and fine dust will go in the dust extractor. And the combination of those two stages will filter out basically. So the idea behind this is I have the shop vac, I bolted or drywall screwed. This is really bad. A Euro box on top of the dust extractor, put the bucket with the cyclone separator. This is a very cheap cyclone separator from Amazon. It's made by Nantong. Costs about 20 euros. I had this for 5, 6, 7 years now. Works flawless. And the bucket was also like 10 euros and it's just screwed on there. And I put a a wooden reinforcement plate in there because the top of this bucket was too flimsy and it was wobbling around. I have a ratchet strap down here that holds the bucket in the box. I cut 2 slots in the box, and the ratchet strap is slinging around. So that's my dust extractor setup. That's all I use. Festool supplies I think it's a 27mm hose with this dust extractor, and for what I do, that's too small in diameter. It gets clogged up with chips very easily, and also it restricts the flow a lot. This is a 40mm shop vac hose, and this works way better. And also this diameter is more standard and kind of fits most power tools. This is one thing that I use on my machines. It's just a 50mm magnet base. I turned an adapter with a ball end that fits I think that's 3/4 inch lock line hose. Then I have this ring on the end here that's just screwed into this nozzle. This nozzle, I cut the end down, I put a filler piece in there, and then I put a screw from the outside through this ring inside the filler piece, and this holds it very rigidly on there. And the inside is turned to a step. So when you take your regular shop vac nozzle and you push it in there, it will lock nicely due to its tapered shape. And the lock line allows you to orient this very quickly and very easy wherever you create dust. This nozzle is modified. I welded the end shut with a piece of plastic that I cut out the side of this thing. Then I opened up the side completely with a die grinder and abrasive wheel. And this is so I can get behind a grinding wheel, for example, on the surface grinder when I grind stone or carbide, for example. So the grinding wheel shoots the stream of dust directly into this nozzle. Also, I can of course use regular straight nozzles like this one for a more pointed approach to dust extraction, for example on the milling machine when I mill phenolics. So this is a very good, this works really well. It's very simple, it's very well working. Can't complain about it, very easy to make. The most expensive part is probably a good magnet. You can also use, of course, a large magnet out of a loudspeaker or something like that, but these are nice because they are switchable. And this is my solution for dusty work at the bench. I just have the shop vac hose or dust extractor hose in the pipe jaws of my bench vise, and I just work close to it. Works excellent for what I do most of the time. And as you saw in the video, it catches pretty much all of the dust that's created in my process. Works very well. And to be honest, this looks like a crude solution, but that's all the fanciness I need for something like this. I don't need a 3D printed fancy 5-axis holder, something with magnets and 5 hard points to mount it to somewhere. I just put the hose in the vise and be done with it. So dealing with dust in a shop is a general problem. there are ways to get around it, like as you have seen, and you just have to live with it to a certain level. I'm constantly cleaning, I'm wiping with wet towels, I'm using a brush and a dust extractor to clean off shelves when I notice that one gets more dusty than it should be. I'm cleaning the walls. The walls are catching a lot of dust in a shop. I'm using a clean brush or a foxtail and a vacuum to clean the walls. I'm not sweeping the floors. I'm always vacuuming the floors if necessary, to not distribute dust around unnecessary, things like that. Also, I'm wet wiping the floors, at least in this part of the shop, because here I have tiles. Over there it's OSB, wooden floor, can't wet wipe that. That would cause some problems. But over here, wet wiping the floors, always very clean. And then, in some cases, when I'm absolutely not confident in the dust extraction that I'm using at this certain operation, I will put on a respirator. Kevin Bullman, what cam package have you settled on for your gantry mill, and what would be your cam and machine controller recommendations for hobbyists for machines in that class? So for the cam package, Fusion 360, honestly, it's the most powerful cam package that you will get for as little money. Even if you, well, there is still the hobbyist license it's limited. It doesn't allow rapid movements and tool changes anymore, but still toolpath generation is still top notch. And it's if you get the license, the yearly subscription, I think that's $500 a year. That's real money. I absolutely understand that, but in my case, for commercially, that's pretty much nothing. It's the big advantage of Fusion is just the integration of CAD and CAM together. When you change your CAD model, it pulls through into CAM, and it's so much quicker than a external CAM software where you always have to export a step or IGES model from CAD and importing it into CAM and redoing your toolpaths, and that's a whole story. So yeah, it is what it is. Unfortunately, we don't have much options here. And for that's the CAM recommendation. For the machine controller, if you're a little bit adventurous and are willing to put time into it, Linux CNC. It's extremely powerful. You can either run it off the parallel port, or you can buy the Mesa hardware, which is a FPGA card that does all the step generation. All the time critical stuff will be done by the Mesa hardware, and it's super fast, super reliable. You can do closed loop systems with linear scales. It can be as good as an industrial controller, but you can also run it as a pure hobby style parallel port controller. Or you go the route of, for example, what I have on the CNC router, it's adding CNC. It's either USB or, in my case, over Ethernet. It works okay. It has some limitations on 3D machining in regards of how fast it can process G-code lines. If you run 3D code too fast, it will start to stutter and have problems in that regard. Okay, let's continue. Kagan Luig asks, do you have tips or tricks or preferred products or fluids that you can share on operating while keeping smoke, fumes, dust, mist, chips contained in the basement? Well, since I have the shop attached to the house, or I used to have it in the house basement, containing chips and fumes always was an issue. I don't want to smell the whole house up with solvents or have chips all over my bedroom. As for the chips, strict shoe discipline is a simple way to get around it. You have shop shoes and you have shoes for everywhere else. I like, in all honesty, I like the good old Croc for the shop when I don't do heavy lifting. They're very, very comfortable. You can get them in any color you want. They are not crazy expensive, so when they are all beaten up and worn, you just get new ones. And they are quick to change from house to shop and back and forth. If I do heavy lifting, machine moving, operate heavier equipment, I will wear steel-toed boots, of course. But apart from that, I will change shoes whenever I leave the shop or go into the shop. And then I skip very smelly products. I don't use brake clean, which I never found the need for brake clean in a machine shop. I'm not a repair shop that works on tractors and stuff like that. There are great non-volatile cleaning products, like from currently I'm playing with the stuff from BioCircle. They have nice water-based cleaners. I don't have solvents in my parts washer or the ultrasonic cleaner. I try not to burn crazy amounts of cutting oils on the lathe, for example, when I do operations with very high surface speed. I change the coolant. Coolant doesn't smell and smoke as much. It's creating just a mist, water fog, and a little bit of oil, but far less than pure straight cutting oil when it burns. That's basically it. Trying to minimize all the emissions from solvents and smoke as far as possible. The cutting oil I'm using that I showed earlier, the Yokish Alpha 93, smokes a little bit less than mineral oil products, but it's still very smoky if it burns. But I try to, just keep it to a minimum where it burns off. Edward Mavis asks, "Hi Stefan, thank you for all your videos. I've enjoyed and learned a great deal from them. My question is, what tool couldn't you live without or have regretted buying?" Well, that's two questions. You couldn't live without, well, I would say Mitutoyo 150mm digital calipers. If anyone asks me what calipers to buy, that's the answer. The Mitutoyo Digimatic digital calipers. What tool I have regretted buying? I would say there isn't really a tool that I regret buying. I regret buying Bobcat, the cam package that I used to use. That was a expensive mistake. Morgan Malmberg asks, "Hi, how do you switch forward and reverse on your lathe so quickly?" The machine has a 3-phase motor, and I put a VFD on it, a variable frequency drive. This allows to run the spindle in different speeds. You can change the frequency, and that changes the RPM of the motor. And also it allows active braking of the motor. And when you do active braking, the energy of the motor needs to go somewhere. And for that reason, I added a brake resistor. If you buy a VFD, it will come usually without a brake resistor. And the manual will say you for what motor power you need a brake resistor. You go on the internet or your preferred electrician and ask them for a brake resistor of the value that you need. They come in a resistance and a power rating, and those two need to match up. The power rating can be higher because that's just how much power it can disperse without catching fire. And then you put that on the VFD. You tell the VFD that it has now a brake resistor, and then this will actively stop the spindle in a heartbeat. And that's the reason why I can change the speed on the spindle so fast. Sam Coot asks, I have two questions, one work-related. How do you go about planning your order of operations? How do you plan it out on paper? Or do a test piece if it's more complicated? I find sometimes in a work order and halfway through I made a mistake and scrap a part. I'd love to know how you do it. Also, I know you love Blind Guardian. Any other power metal band that are right up there for you? Do you listen to a shop at times? I answered the music questions, I think, to an extent, so I'm just concentrating on the part one here. So, order of operations it comes from experience, of course. Having done prototyping at work for several years, I got pretty okay at deciding, for example, the order of operations, if I need to build custom fixture or if I can just super glue gauge blocks to a vise and be done in half an hour. The problem is when you do skip fixture building in some cases and it turns out to be a return job, you will bite yourself in the you know where. I do sometimes plan out the work on paper. I will either look at the CAD model or at the drawing and just go through a mental exercise looking at the part and looking at my raw stock that I'm probably going to work with and just think through the steps. If it meets reality, then it's another topic. If on something like 10 parts on the lamp housings, I made a test part beforehand just to figure out all my tools, if the tools work how I intend, if I hit the dimensions without taking crazy precautions, and also figure out my order of operations. And if I find one way that works very well on the beginning, I will stay to that. I will slavish stay on that plan. I will not halfway through a production run change my order of operations. That has bitten me so often in, well, you know where. Again, this is experience. This is nothing you can really teach somebody. You have to do the footwork. You have to mess up parts, and I have messed up a lot, and I messed up a lot of time when I tried to skip certain steps. This is really something that's extremely hard to explain, even harder to teach, and probably the easiest it is just learning by doing. Recently I did parts where I noticed doing the test part that the part will warp. So I did a second test part where I added another step in to skip the flexing of the part or the warping of the part because I had the chance to relieve one section of the stock, and the stock released its stresses, and then I finish machined it. And then I didn't have the issues of warping. And that was a very weird case of warping because it didn't change its flatness or something like that, but it changed its diameter. When I write one day a book about prototyping, I'll demonstrate that there. Joshua Stapley asks, you might be planning on covering this in a future video, but with your toolmakes block, how do you adjust geometry while lapping? Parallelism and squareness. Well, you influence lapping by moving the hand pressure on the block. If you want one side to be more aggressively lapped than the other one, you put your hand there, or you apply a little bit more pressure. If you need one side to be lapped less, you can also have it overhang over the side of the lapping plate and spare it that way from being lapped, and then you come back onto the whole surface and equalize it out, and that way you can shift the geometry around. It's relatively slow. There is no real manual how to do it. You need to get the feeling how to do it yourself. Whatever works is whatever you gets you to the goal of the correct geometry on the part is the correct way to do it. Comrade Bob asks, tell us about the cats. Well, that's these two fellows here. On the left, that's Ernie, and on the right, that's Bert. Ernie and Bert. There is not much to say about them. They are cats, they are assholes, and they are the most lovely assholes around. Mumblebee B. Would an electronic lead screw such as the one made by James at Clock 42 work for you if you make customer parts? Yes. Next. No, in all seriousness, yes, it would work. There is also the ELS, electronic lead screw from Rocketronix, and I used to have that on my old lathe, and it worked brilliantly. It's really a good product, it works well. But the MCO, in all honesty, is good enough with its change gear setup, and it's working just fine for me. I don't want to do the modifications to that machine anymore. Ike asks, well, he asks 3 questions. How do you calculate offers for projects like the lamp housing where you need special tooling? Rod guessing how long it takes to build special tooling based on your experience, and some projects leave more revenue and others less when you make fixed price offers that are a bit off. Or are you offering riskier project based on your hourly rate and tell the customer it will take Y to C hours and you charge them by the hours? Well, I do not charge by the hour. I look at a project, I will give the customer a quote, and then we will negotiate if necessary. And then I will make the part to the quoted price. I will not renegotiate if I take longer or it's getting more expensive. That's I don't do that. When I look at a project, I already, from experience, I know when I need special tooling, like the lathe tool for the Edison thread on the lamp housings. I knew that this is something I need to make, and that will require me about 1 to 3 hours, and I just add in some hours into my quote for special tooling. The upside on having a fixed price is I'm easy to distract in the shop. I'm constantly on the phone or on the PC checking something and just bumbling around. And that doesn't change the price for the customer. When you charge by the hour, that really gets complicated because you have to really keep track of your time. B, maybe you can tell us a bit about your 9-to-5 job. Of course, not naming your employer. Well, I did that already, but telling us a bit more if it's a job shop, maintenance workshop of a larger company, general production shop of a company, or something like that. I mentioned it already. My current place where the current shop, it's in a large company. We are the special machine building division. We build all of our in-house production equipment. That's automated assembly equipment and a little bit of inspection equipment too. We do a high number of our product, and that for that reason the automation has to be relatively fast and very, very reliable. It's robotics, it's mechanics, pneumatics. We have the electrics. For that we have electricians, but I'm also allowed to do some electric work. We have programmers for the PLC and the robots, but I'm basically 90% mechanic and a little bit of machinist when things need to be modified. We get the parts, of course, machined from our in-house or job shop from outside. We get them machined, we get the parts, we check them, we do some finessing work, like usually the deburring. We have a very high standard of deburring. We do that ourselves. We assemble it. When we set up a machine and it's running and the machine is not working as intended, we will modify it to make it work. And it's just we do start from finish on production equipment in-house, and that's what I'm doing. C, question from my workmate: when will Stefan get his hairs cut? Well, do I have to? Greg LaRoche asks, how do you organize storing tools and other parts and pieces? That's complicated. That's, in all honesty, I plan to do a video on shop organization and how I keep a kinda clean shop. The answer is I strictly decide what to keep and what to throw out, and what I keep goes somewhere in a fixed place. I'm not big on, as you can see on this picture, I'm not big into specific drawer inserts with cutouts because stuff changes a lot in my shop. From one day to the other, I might change my indicators, or the whole drawer might change around, and then I don't want to have to deal with a bunch of foam or wood cutouts that I have to move around. This is in this drawer I keep collets and chucks, for example, but it might change. I might get rid of one of the chucks and buy a different one. Then I just need this room in this drawer to change. This is, for example, how I store my 1 meter long sticks of material in the smaller diameter ones. This is 40 millimeter PVC pipe that I hot glued together and bolted against the wall, and it's all labeled. All the stock that I have in there is labeled too. In this cabinet, I have shorter drops up to 30 centimeters length. And again, everything is labeled on the ends, or engraved or stamped or written on what it is. That's with stock, that's always the most important thing. If you don't know what the stock is, you can also just throw it away into scrap. Even for hobbyists, I think that it's important what you're working with. Here you can see the engraved and stamped material numbers on the ends of those material sticks. And here is what I do for the 1 meter sticks. I have one of those P-Chart label printers, and I just print a flag like this and glue it on the end of the stick. Or here, stamped. This is a good example. As you can see, I have a lot of things on the wall. A lot of my equipment or accessories goes on the walls. The machines are pushed up against the walls, and I have a ton of shelves on the walls. For example, for the taper tooling for the mill, there is a shelf underneath it with mill work holding, and above the lathe there is a shelf for all the multifix tool holders, and so on and so on. And that's just the way I like to have my tooling accessible. Russell Hayard asks, how do you calculate change gears for a thread pitch or feed rate? That's a very good question that I cannot really answer. I don't know how to do that correctly, because depending on the gears and the lead screw, there are some kinds more than one solution to this equation, how to get to your change gears. I know that there are change gear calculators on the internet, either as an Excel spreadsheet, or I think there are even dedicated programs. You might have to strain Google to find that. I seriously cannot give a good answer for this. Despite using change gears on the MCO lathe came with a change gear table that has pretty much all possible change gear combinations for certain thread pitches in it. Greg's Workshop asks, what general advice would you offer to aspiring precision machinists to help develop their skills in accuracy? Do shop projects. Find a skill that you're interested in, like working precise, and then just choose a shop project that will ask you to work precise. If you want to learn scraping, find a scraping project. If you want to do a surface grinding project, make parallels. If you want to learn video editing, edit videos, and on the way learn it. And also for general developing a certain accuracy in your work habits, it's just Work as clean as possible, measure as much as possible, question everything that you do, check everything with an indicator. If you haven't checked it, it might be off, so check it. Ian McDonald. Hi Stefan, I note you're using Fusion. What happened to the Libre package you purchased some time ago? Well, I still have it, but to be honest, we all make mistakes. I made a very expensive mistake here by buying a Libre and Bobcat. Both work well enough, but I had serious problems with Bobcat on the toolpath generation time. I did some parts for a customer and I had toolpath generation times up over an hour, which Fusion did in 5 minutes, and it was only a 2.5D toolpath. And that was the reason to get Fusion 360 subscription as fast as possible. And that allowed me to finish that project very quickly. And in all honesty, the workflow with a separate CAD and CAM package is a logistical nightmare. The way Fusion has integrated CAD and CAM in one is so much faster to work with, especially if you have to iterate through many versions of the same part or project. When it sells, I'm working on an old high precision machine which needs 1 or 2 new parts. I'm creating the specifications, but I'm struggling a bit with drawing the dimensions and features versus describing how and why the part will be used. Even if I have the original drawings, some constraints or requirements may not apply to my use case, and another approach might be better suited or easier to manufacture. Well, what you describe is the problem in all of engineering and machining. Deciding and understanding tolerances, how tolerances affect each other, and where you need certain tolerances and constraints, or geometric tolerances like flatness, squareness, concentricity, and things like that. You cannot really say how you will learn that. You have to pick it up over time, and you need to get an understanding how things work together. If you know that you have a shaft with 10 millimeter diameter, for example, and it needs to slide freely in a hole, a very sloppy fit, you will dimension it diameter 10 for the hole. But then the machinist will see it and say, well, I couldn't drill it diameter 10 or maybe 9.9. That's within the standard tolerancing. So you would have to, in the drawing, you would have to add the call out to make it bigger. That's the first thing to understand. You need it to be bigger than 10 millimeters. So it's already 10 plus. Now you have to think, is 10.000 still viable for the shaft that goes in there? The shaft has a tolerance too. So it could be 10 plus 0.1 millimeter and 10 plus 0.2 millimeters. So the hole can be between 10.1 and 10.2. But how do you know where to go with these tolerances? That's experience. In engineering books, you will find some hints and some guidelines on general tolerancing, and that will help you a little bit. I know this is not the greatest of answers, I have to say, but this is such a broad topic, and all of the tolerancing and geometric tolerancing stuff is it's something you could study, or you have to study really if you want to have it to understand it completely and be able to apply it. And still then you will not be able to do it 100% correct each time. Eric Mailet. Hey Stefan, I have an old Coolmom pantograph for which I cannot find collet. Would you suggest a spindle conversion to ER collet? Yes. I did that on my Deckel G1L engraver. I made a complete replacement spindle. I would not modify the original spindle because those are made really, really well, and maybe someday you will find the original collets. But I would recommend taking it apart, taking measurements, and starting from scratch building one. For the spindle shaft, I would just buy a straight shanked ER collet chuck. Those are readily available and not horrendous expensive, and all the hard work on them is already done. And usually there are a nice sliding fit on a set of bearings, and then you're already off to a good start. So, one last question from CellG88. What does the life of Stefan look like on a regular day, maybe daily schedule? How do you manage to do high precision work without a CNC lathe or mill? Well, I have a CNC mill right next to me. It's not a high precision machine. I use it mostly for non-critical stuff. I can do high precision work on it, but it takes a little bit of fiddling. For example, using cutter compensation to walk dimensions into tolerance. A manual machine is not different to a CNC mill if it's a basic 3-axis or 4-axis machine. I have the DROs on the machine. If I hadn't DROs, I had the dials, which are also very accurate, or I could use dial indicators which actually show the travel, just like a DRO. So the precision doesn't come from CNC. The precision comes from the machine itself. The other question, what does a regular day of mine look like? Well, there is none. Monday on 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, I'm working day job from 7 to 15 o'clock. And on those days, I will still go into my shop, either work on projects or film for videos, or sit on the computer and edit video, or do CAD work, or write invoices and ship parts. On some days I will not be in the shop. I'm going either bouldering or cinema or meeting friends or have to deal with other stuff. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are reserved for my own business. Basically, it's shop time. It's mostly shop time. I try not to do organizing or administrative stuff on the weekends. First of all, you can't reach people on Saturday and Sunday if it's a business related customer. Private customers you can reach on weekends, but most of them don't appreciate weekends emails a ton. So I try to do administrative tasks during the week. I try to be as much in the shop as possible and get as much work out as possible on those days, but also Sunday evening I'm going bouldering. Friday evening most likely I'll be in the cinema, or Saturday evening I'll be in the cinema. But there are also days where I'm Saturday evening in the shop cranking out parts or filming for YouTube. So not really a strict schedule for me, but more a when do I have time to do stuff and when can I fit other things in, and trying to not burn out that way. So I hope you enjoyed this AMA. I think this is like 1 hour long now. It was bare to edit, to be honest. And also bare to edit. I'm not used to be as much in front of the camera as I was in this video. Usually it's like 5 minutes for an intro and then 5 minutes for the outro, and not like an hour. I'm also a little bit sorry that I used so much clip show background for voiceover editing, but at some point I just don't want to see myself during editing anymore, and I'm just scrolling through pictures. So thank you all for the questions, thank you all for the support, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with a proper video about a maybe interesting topic.